In many ways, it feels like people are overthinking why things aren't working in comics. So I did the video about like solving a problem that you don't actually need to solve and kind of other things. But I've been thinking about this more and more lately as the conversation goes to how do we get new readers? How do we get people into comics? How do we get kind of this new audience to come in and get hooked and, and read things? And everybody's like, oh, it's like the mystery that cannot be solved. It's so difficult to figure out how we do this. It's the lost treasure. It's it's this impossible task. But I don't think it is. And I think the answer is pretty clear when you just pick up today's comics what the problem is. Now, this isn't me bashing comics. Don't worry. If you clicked on this is not going to be comics bad, hit over the head. It's that I think there's an easy answer to this question that maybe not maybe, we're definitely overthinking. Hey everybody, this is Perch. One of the comics that's going to sell well, for the month of September, is X-Men Ten of Swords Creation #1. It's going to sell well because it's part of a big crossover storyline, and it's got lots of chapters to it. It's got a really nice art team. It's something that's it's going to spark a little bit renewed interest in the Dawn of X line that it kind of sunk a little bit from the House of X Powers of 10 moments. It's definitely got a rabid fan base, and it's going to do well. I would say that comic will probably be in the 80 to 90,000. I don't think it's going to crack 100,000, but it might. But I think it's going to be certainly up there. It's a success. But if you read that comic, I think it's very clear inside that comic alone why comics as a whole are not finding new readers. And here's, please, there's a lot of knee-jerk kind of reactions to what I'm about to say. I am not suggesting, just to get it out there, that they don't publish this, Ten of Swords Creation #1. I'm not suggesting you stop publishing that. In fact, to the contrary, when you have a comic that's coming out that's selling close to 100,000 copies or maybe beyond it, you should publish more of those. You absolutely should. That's a good thing. Keep doing that. Don't stop doing that. At the same time, if you read that story and you hand it to somebody who is, new to comics, not read the X-Men, just you're trying to appeal to this new audience, the vast majority of them are going to not know what the F is going on and not bother reading more. That book is not going to hook new people in. Now, you can say, and you would be right, hey, not every book needs to hook people in. Not every book needs to be a bait for a new comic reader. And I agree. And that's where I think we're overthinking this problem. I think that people are getting very binary about things like every comic has to appeal to a new audience. Every comic needs to be written in such a way. If it's not, it's like what Jerry Conway said, just cancel all the comics. Just cancel them all and start all over and then do things in OGNs for the old audience. And, you don't need to do that. As I said in another video, that's a ridiculous solution to that problem. All you need to do is, as a publisher, kind of recognize which are the books that are appealing to my existing core audience, where I can sell 100,000 copies of them. Which are the books that are not? Excalibur as a book, I think, is sitting, I believe, in the 40s, the 40,000 kind of range, outside of Ten of Swords. Now, Excalibur as a book is not new reader friendly. Now again, I say this, and there's always somebody who comes up like, I'm reading it for the first time and I love it. Great, you're an exception, but most people are not able to open up that comic book and really understand what is happening. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to stop publishing it, but it does mean that that's not the book. That's not the book that's going to hook your new audience. And if you do want to hook a new audience, you're going to have to publish some books that are. Okay, you might say, well, then that's what, Naomi is for, and that's what Unstoppable Wasp is for, and that's what these other books are for, and that's why we publish, Miss Marvel and Squirrel Girl and some others like that. The problem is, if you pick up those books, you'll discover they actually read and feel a whole lot more like Excalibur and Ten of Swords Creation than something truly that's for a new audience. I challenge you, and I think a lot of people don't like to take up this challenge, but pick up, pick up Dogman, pick up a Raina Telgemeier book, open it up and read it, and see for yourself, is it accessible or not? And the answer is it is. The comics are very accessible. So what does that tell us? It tells us that certainly it's possible to do this. It also tells us that as we struggle, because you see this stuff play out, and weirdly, unlike other industries, you see people in the comic industry, think out loud. They write down, they go on Twitter and they post threads about this kind of stuff all the time. Like, what really is needed for to get a new audience is that we've got to age up all the characters. We ought to make them kind of racially reflect a more diverse community, and this and that and all the rest. And it's too complicated. You can do all those things and still not appeal to a new audience. In fact, as we can see from today's comic books, that is what's happening. They have tried a lot of these things. These things are not necessarily bad ideas, but they're still missing the obvious, which is it's not written in a way for a new reader to just pick up the book and go. And and here's the crazy part. If you were to hand a brand new person, somebody who's not read comics, Amazing Fantasy number 15, or Fantastic Four, number 1, or Teen Titans number 1, not current Teen Titans. I'm talking like 70s Teen Titans number 1. In fact, even crazier. This is my hypothesis. If you handed a brand new comic reader something like Blackest Night, you would find that they would probably adapt quicker to that than today's modern comics, which are in theory supposed to appeal to new readers. I'm completely convinced that if you handed somebody like the 1970s Teen Titan or Titans or Amazing Fantasy number 15, I'm quite confident that new comic readers would figure out what's going on, would adapt to the comic, would probably read it better than comics that are produced today, even though the art style is, quote unquote dated, even though it's, all white people running around in like Amazing Fantasy number 15, even though, the whole premise of like an old time telephone and, wrestling for money and some of these kind of concepts that really don't exist today, that's still going to map easier to a new comic reader, a new fan, than some of the current efforts. And why is that? Because they're written to be accessible. So there's a lot of work and effort and stress and time being put into, we've got to go capture this new audience. But in many cases, the comics are very dense, very convoluted to read as a new reader. Again, please, I'm not taking shots at things like Excalibur, for example. But Excalibur is if you pick that book up and read it, it's very difficult for somebody who's not already hooked by comics to want to read more. It's just not happening. And I think, and so it feels like there's this struggle that goes on saying, well, how do I do the worst of both worlds? How do we, homogenize the characters and change everything around and rip continuity away and just kind of throw away decades of storytelling and history and concepts? Let's do that, because we need to throw those things away because it's way too hard for new readers to understand. But simultaneously, we're going to write this comic and put it out in a format that is painful for somebody who's not used to comics to read. That's the folly of all this. We're doing the worst two options, and we're saying this is going to attract new readers, and of course it won't. One part of Jerry Conway, for people who are catching up now, he basically said this is how you fix the industry. You cancel all the comics, you reboot them all for a new audience, and then you do some OGNs from time to time for the old existing audience. In a nutshell, it's more complex than that. I'm representing his point perhaps poorly. I'm representing it very quickly. But I would argue, actually, there again, almost the opposite is true. If you're going to do something like this, I do think if you're talking about ease into the market, it would make sense to actually published to the new audience in an OGN format. It would actually make a lot more sense to do that. And while this is going to make artists and this is going to make people like cringe, what I'm about to say, but if you took some of the classic stories and you simply, more than just the one origin story we've seen from time to time. The other problem here, by the way, with new comic readers is that think about the origin point. This could almost be a whole video in itself, but think about how the origin of Batman, the origin of Spider-Man, the origin of the Fantastic Four, but especially let's look at Spider-Man and Batman. Now, Spider-Man he's on some kind of sciencey field trip thing. A spider comes down, it bites him. He gets some powers. He wakes up, starts climbing on walls, and that's his origin. We all know that origin. It's been in every movie. We've seen it a million times, and we don't want to see it again. Whenever and in the comics, they're constantly retelling the story. They're redrawing it. Well, when you get somebody who's new to comics, they're not coming in having no idea who Spider-Man is. Odds are they know who Spider-Man is. They've seen a cartoon, a movie, something. They know this origin. I said there's this idea that's going to make artists cringe. One thing that wouldn't be the worst idea in the world is to go back and actually start to redraw and re-put out the classic Spider-Man stories, and which has been done before. People have done that, and they don't sell particularly well. They don't necessarily hook the audience, but they all go back and they redraw that same original origin story. It's like, hey, we're going to do a Batman story, and in this Batman story, he's going down the alley, and the parents getting shot, and the pearls are going everywhere, and I would love to see somebody as a hobby. There's a lot of dumb things people do to waste their time. I'd like to see something that somebody does as a hobby. Take all the times we've had Batman's parents getting shot in the alley and collect them all into one giant book. I'll bet you would have a 1,000-page book with some amazing artists. Everybody. Gary Frank's done it. John Byrne's done it. Ivan Rice has done it. You can go. George Perez has done it. I'm sure Jim Lee has done it at some point. You can just go down the list. And I think there's like, it would be actually interesting who hasn't done it. Maybe as a fun little book, you want one of these 80th anniversary, let's just go out and commission all these artists that haven't done the 2-page how Batman's parents got shot in the alley. Let's have them all do it. Let's see what Rob Liefeld, let's see how that would look from him, and let's get Mike Del Mundo, and screw it. Let's just get an 80-page book of nothing but parents getting shot. Why not? Tom King could write it. Anyway, I think the problem, the thing that would be valuable is go back and look at some of these stories that did hook young readers. And don't just do the origin story. Then do Spider-Man number 1 through 50. Put it back out. Hire a contemporary artist. Hey, good news. You don't even need to pay money for a new writer. You're just regurgitating the same stories and just have them redo it. And put that out. Call them. You can call it. Don't label them something that's going to turn off the readers. Don't call it like Marvel Classics or anything like that. Just call it Spider-Man, Volume 1. Do it manga style. Don't even color it, and just have 60 pages, Volume 1, and it's the same stories, just redrawn. Draw it on the cheap. Go to Argentina or wherever you're going to go for some art. Whatever. Just put this stuff out. That's most likely going to appeal, get you to get new readers, than trying to create Mosaic or Brimstone or whatever it happens to be. That has a much lower chance of attracting new readers. And so I get back to the original point. People are overthinking this whole thing. I don't think it's that hard to get new readers. I just think you got to stop thinking within the context of the current comics you're printing and try and kind of cram a bunch of kind of window dressing elements into into something where you're still writing and producing and throwing out the comic the same way you always have. That's why Conway's idea would have failed, by the way, is like, let's just go appeal to the new audience and start printing monthlies for them. Well, number one, maybe your new audience doesn't want monthlies. It's probably your new audience that wants the OGNs. You've actually taken something that people are used to today, the monthly comic, and you're taking it away from them, and instead you're going to throw that out to a new audience where you have no proof that that new audience even wants to consume comics that way. That's a recipe for failure. In fact, not only do you have evidence saying they don't, you have very, very solid evidence from Scholastic of exactly the format that the new audience wants. So why are we throwing away that very clear data point? Anyway, what do you think of all this? Is it impossible? How do you appeal to a new audience? How do you do it? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. It's an interesting topic. Again, I hope people didn't hear this as a bunch of like beating up on the comic industry. It's not. I think the answer is right there, and in many cases, the comic industry is doing a lot of the right things. We just it's just like you need a little nudge. It's like, hey, just stop eating the paint. It won't. It's not good for you. Anyway, thanks for listening.